Welcome to a slightly different podcast. So I'm actually on my own. Well, I'm not on my own. I'm with my little brother, but I'm not with Alex this week. We are sort of shooting, if you like, or recording a little bit on location. So my little brother is currently in Ibiza. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Yeah. As
As
strange
you
as
can.
that sounds, I guess, to be having this sort of conversation. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I was really scared my phone was going to fall down. So yeah, this is also not my usual office, but it does look. I wouldn't mind if it was my usual office. It'd be quite good if I'm honest. But
Does.
yeah,
It
and
looks
I do
really, really
apologise
nice.
now if I slap myself when there's mosquitoes flying around.
Absolutely. So it looks really, really good where you are. I am definitely jealous. So I on this podcast series before. So obviously this is I'm not actually sure what episode of the podcast we're on. I think Alex is going to kill me because he always very clearly says we're on this episode of the Coventry Cortex whenever we start, and I'm on my own today, so I'm not doing the admin correctly. But this is our latest episode of the Coventry Cortex, and before I've kind of teased the idea of sort of like talking a little bit to my brother because he essentially did sports psychology when he was at uni, and obviously we offer sports psychology as a course at our university. So I really just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about sports psychology in general, and then also kind of how you found it and sort of what you have been doing since you kind of graduated, and then also a little bit about kind of what sport looks like today and how much of a role psychology kind of plays in it. So I guess to start with, really, what are your thoughts on everything that's kind of happened recently with like the World Cup? I know that we're a few weeks after it, but I also know that we were watching it kind of in parallel because you were obviously in Germany at the time. So the time differences were really weird for you as well, weren't they?
Well, in the words of Thomas Tuchel, it was a mentality thing, wasn't it? Really? Well, that's what he said. No, my opinions on the World Cup. Well, we can first of all let's talk about the World Cup in general. I guess the World Cup's always a place to shine. It's the big stage. It's the world stage, and um, lots of players and lots of teams. They tend to either fall at the first hurdle or they shine. I mean, you've got teams of smaller countries which end up doing sometimes very surprisingly well. This year, definitely, we had obviously the shock with Cape Verde and Spain in their first opening game. Some would say it's a shock. Now, you could
What
argue,
was the shock? Because I didn't follow it quite as intently as you, Rob. Sorry, I think I should have also introduced you as Rob, by the way. Like I have spoke about Rob, my brother, before, but like, yeah. What was the shock? So like, who won that match?
well, Spain at the time of the game were the European champions, and obviously everyone knows that they're a powerhouse in football as of the recent 20 years or so. And the Cape Verde obviously is a tiny country, an absolute minuscule country, and they held the European champions, which many had as favourites to win the competition. They held them to a 0-0 draw, and they couldn't break them down. And when you put it on paper, what talent Spain had, and you compare it with the talent that Cape Verde had, you'd think, oh, it would be a goal fest, much similar to the Germany against sorry, it's uh, can't remember what it's called. Curacao. I try to remember that also might be the German name for it because I did watch this game in German. So I think it's Curacao. I think that is the English name. But yeah, oh yeah,
My
by the way,
brother
I
often
also live
has to
in.
switch between German and English as well. I should probably like kind of like you've lived in
Yeah,
Germany for so long now that your German's starting to
yeah.
replace your English.
I need to. Yeah. So if I'm talking like uh someone that can't speak fluent English, it's because my brain is trying to explain things in English and German at the same time. And I'm currently on holiday with everyone but one person who's actually from Norway. So I'm constantly just speaking German and then switching to English, and then I'm just falling over myself constantly. So yeah. Anyway, back on topic. Yeah, Germany obviously rolled Curacao quite easily 7-1, and that's what many people thought would happen with Spain and Cape Verde. Now the question is, did Spain play bad or did Cape Verde play well? You know, it's one of those type of thing, and that's a very much a psychology thing. So I guess at times Spain had the world on their shoulders, thinking, "Well, you're gonna have to win this." Now, did they not win, or did they draw because they thought they were going to win and they just were like, "Oh, it's going to be an easy game. We're going to goal soon. We're going to goal." Or was it a mentality thing? Was it something that they were like, "Wow, it's just I don't know. It's just it's so underwhelming that they just couldn't break them down." On the other side, you've got Cape Verde, who were against, it was David and Goliath in a way, and they used all that they had and kept them to a normal draw. And in a way, it was a win. They say sometimes in football that a draw can feel like a win and a draw could feel like a loss. And for Spain, that draw felt like a loss, and for Cape Verde, it was a win. I think they even had like a party. I think the whole country had a party, and I think that's the beautiful thing about the World Cup is when you have these small teams and they do something so unexpectedly. I was going to say unexpected. That's German. And they hold someone like that to a normal draw, and I mean, yeah, that's also psychological boost for the whole country as well. So I'm really happy for that. I'm really happy for Cape Verde. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think so. This is something that I didn't. So obviously, you did sports psychology for your undergrad, and then you've kind of gone on to sort of do like football coaching. And I know that we've spoke about this before, that a lot of your kind of psychology from your undergrad comes into obviously what you're doing when you're coaching. I remember when I did my undergrad that we kind of touched a little bit on the psychology of sport, but we didn't really go into it in massive detail because I was just doing pure BSc psych. But one of the things that I do remember them saying is that there are lots of studies that show that, particularly in football, that if you're a team that's not expected to win, and you're playing away, so it also matters whether or not you're playing at home versus whether or not you're playing away. If you're not expected to win and you're playing away, you are actually far more likely then to win because you have nothing to lose. So there are lots of little kind of studies that basically it's like the underdog mentality, and I'm just wondering whether or not Cape Verde, if I've got that right, whether or not if they were the ones that were like, not expected to win against like Spain, that obviously were the champions and who went on to win it, they had nothing to lose but everything to gain, and that kind of gives them a bit of a psychological advantage because the
Oh
pressure is
yeah,
then on
definitely.
Spain to defend that
Yeah,
title. Do you
yeah.
get that a lot when you're working with some of the football teams or the coaching that you've done? Have you ever had kind of your so you most recently been working with a female football team
Correct. Yeah.
in Germany? Do you ever get that? Do you ever get like kind of little wobbles and stuff where the team are worrying or stressing because they're expected to win? Or
Oh, I mean, all the time. I mean, firstly, I'll speak from my own experience as a player, actually, before as a
yeah.
coach. Um, yes, yeah, like, I've also played several games. I mean, last season I was coaching and playing football myself, and we were very much at the top of the table, doing really well, and we ended up playing a team which was at the bottom, which had barely got scored anything the whole season, and they they luckily nicked a goal quite early just through a mistake through one of us. And for all that we had, we couldn't break them down. And it wasn't because we were worse than them. It was because I think we just expected ourselves to win, that we weren't trying as much because we were then maybe trying to just be a little bit too cute with everything and just trying to make the perfect goal to make it, we were trying to have almost like we were like a cat playing with a mouse in a way type thing, with like a cat playing with like a dead mouse, just basically like, oh, it's going to happen anytime soon. And the time's ticking, time's ticking, time's ticking. They're obviously taking it a lot more seriously. They're obviously, as the game's going on, they'll obviously feel a bit more pressure. But I think we just didn't really switch on at all, because it's like, oh, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But yeah, we ended up losing that game, and I think we ended up losing 2-0 because right at the end they had a breakaway, and we were trying at the end of that last 10 minutes really hard to score a goal, and we ended up giving away a penalty. The heat of the moment, one of our defenders decided to take the guy's legs, and still to this day I don't know why he did it, but yeah, that lost us the game. So, but
But again, it's
yeah,
probably that pressured decision, isn't it, in that last moment? Like it's out of desperation. And I mean,
yeah,
again, I'm not a sports psychologist, but my area is a lot more to do with kind of like cognitive psychology, developmental stuff, educational stuff. But I do quite often talk about the impact of things like cortisol on things like your decision making, your
yeah,
frontal lobe capabilities. Cortisol is our worst enemy as a stress hormone because
mm,
not only does it kind of eat away at our hippocampus, so it makes things harder to remember, but it also clouds our focus, or it can also sometimes heighten our focus. So you even get things like, and this is going more into kind of like forensic sort of settings, but things like weapon focus, the cortisol can make you focus on things that are acutely important. And I think in those kind of situations, yeah, you're probably acutely aware that time is ticking, time is running out. I need to make this tackle. You over focus on it and you end up maybe taking out their
yeah,
legs, or
yeah,
rather than
definitely.
thinking about the broader picture of the game and how actually there's a very clear pass waiting in front of you if you just hold
I,
back for a
yeah,
second.
definitely. I think he in that moment really did see danger, and I think to
Mm,
be honest, had he have just relaxing, I'd just gone, ah, well, if I just put him off a little bit, he'll probably miss because he wasn't that good of a. I mean, they hadn't given us any real trouble the whole game apart from the first goal, and he almost in a way got so stressed in that one moment that he thought, oh no, you know, this guy is gonna end it for us, but and really he didn't.
mhm,
The I was going to say the Giga. The the opposition didn't end the game for us. It was actually our own player which ended up ending it and causing a
mhm,
penalty. But yeah, as a coaching side and talking about the psychology of it all, yeah, I found a lot of my times, if but I can only speak from the coaching side from when I was coaching the women, and I found like when they felt that someone was already better than them, they from the start just didn't play as well. Like
mm,
they always took a while to build into the game a lot more. And as soon as you could feel that, like the momentum for them was sort of like, oh, well, we could maybe get something here. They really did sort of then go for it type thing. But I think often or not, I found that they tended to, okay, well, this person's above us in the table, or this team's above us in the table, therefore they are better than us. Now, I can't really talk on the 100% on the gender differences in psychology for that, but I'm sure it's very much similar. But I don't know. That's one thing I did find I had to sort of control. That it could have also just been this particular group of players that they in themselves like had that sort of lack of self-belief, and that was a lot of my job as a trainer to sort of like, hey, what are you doing? Like, you know, you do this in training, you do this so well here, like you've played teams like this before, you've got to sort of like build that up, you've got to sort of remind them, and that is the difficult part. And I think often or not, they're so focused on the what's ahead of them right now that they sort of forget what they've already achieved and what they can achieve and what they have in them. So you got to almost, as the coach, you got to sort of remind them the whole time, sort of like, well, hang on a second, think back. You've achieved this before. You've scored goals like this before. You've got out of this situation before, and it's really sort of like cement that into them. And that's a difficult thing. That's something you need to sort of build on to get that overall confidence and that sort of mentality that we can do this. And that is what I assume, or what Tuchel said was England's problem when it came to football, was that we have this mentality that we're always going to lose. It's like the Frank and Skinner song, as they say. But I also thought it was quite hypocritical of himself, because he also said that we before the tournament started that we should lower our expectations. But then he sits there and says something like, yeah, as a country, we should lower our expectations, he said. And he said then afterwards that, you know, or before I think it was before the game, or it was either before the game or no, it was after the game. He said the whole, yeah, it's sort of like in our DNA type thing, you know, we're not really like quite there yet. But I think he was basically trying to be like, I think it was for a lack of better words and a better way of explaining himself. But it was a sort of like that mentality that, you know, we're not world champions. We need to sort of achieve something, yes, and believe in ourselves more before we will be world champions. Like you get a team like Germany, for instance, and they are world champions. So they're 4-time world champions, and they have a mentality that they will be world champions again. And they're currently going through a real rough time. For the last, they won the World Cup in 2014, and since then, since the introduction of VAR, Schadenfreude, they've had a really tough time. And the more interesting part about it is you listen to the fans and somewhat my friends as well, and they really are going through the ringer at the moment. Like they really are, like just sort of like, we're champions. We're so used to winning. We're so used to doing well. And then you look at the last couple of tournaments, and they've been knocked out in the group stages. They've been knocked out in the last round of last 16. They, you know, they've really done nothing. I mean, like, yeah, the Euros the year before, they got through to the semi-finals, but after watching those games, they really did sort of, you know, do an England and sort of scrape their ways through it. I mean, everyone was quite poor in the last Euros, but yeah, and then they were very much unlucky with the handball, but we were unlucky with the Lampard goal. So, Schadenfreude.
So do you think that's like overconfidence then? Because I mean, I guess what I was thinking is, again, I don't know loads about the sports psychology studies, but there are some studies I always remember going over, and this is why I always say to people, I am a psychologist, but I'm superstitious. And they always look at me gone out like these two things cannot exist hand in hand. And I have to take a step back and I explain to them that no, actually, they go hand in hand, but they go hand in hand because of something that we call self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is kind of like your belief in your own ability and yourself and whether or not you think you can really do it, right? So that's kind of, I guess, what we're talking about here. And studies show that if people have a higher rate of self-efficacy, they tend to do better at tasks than when they feel less confident in their ability. And the reason that it ties to superstition is there's quite a few interesting studies where they've given people a lucky charm or something that they feel gives them luck, then got them to do a very kind of benign task like a word search or something like that. And if they do it with their lucky charm, they will find more words in the 60 seconds that they have versus when they don't have their lucky charm. And it's the same if you wish these people good luck, they'll do better in 60 seconds than they do when they're not told good luck, when they look at the two different groups together. But it only works with people who are superstitious. It doesn't work with control groups who are kind of self-defined as not being superstitious. So when the researchers looked at it, they basically boiled it down to the fact that it's got nothing to do with the fact that a lucky charm gives you luck. It's everything to do with whether or not you feel that it gives you luck, and that then you feel more confident and you bolster this self-efficacy and you're able to do better. So I always kind of argue as a psychologist that yes, I am superstitious, but it's also perfectly logical for me to believe in it from the self-efficacy perspective, because if I believe in it, then I'll kind of do better because I know I believe in it. And I think in these kind of instances, we're talking about sort of self-belief in whether or not players think that they can win, but also what you're kind of saying is that actually it can almost have a bit of a negative impact if it goes too far, that they almost presume they're going to win. I suppose it's almost like an overconfidence that they then I suppose lose sight of the more logistical skill-based aspects maybe.
Of actually just completing the task at hand. And that's often or not what happens in the sort of like David and the Goliath games, like like you say, like where they're almost so confident and so expectant that they're gonna win, that like you say, like they don't perform. They just don't hit the levels that they would usually hit because I guess in a way they don't feel that they need to, you know. And I think that's very understandable. I think if you were to put in, I think you could equate that to lots of different sports, you know. And
I was going to ask, do you think there are differences between sports? Like, are there certain personality characteristics or qualities that are probably more important in different sports, would you say?
ooh, yeah, definitely. I think you sort of at times can win a game through arrogance, and I think you can win a game through being just purely aggressive. So therefore, I think it depends on the sport what type of characteristic you would then need. Like, you won't need someone being aggressive if you were playing snooker. You need someone then as calm and methodical, you know,
Regulated,
and
yeah.
regulated. But then as soon as you get to a sport like MMA, I mean, you could argue that McGregor's, you know, famous fight against Jose, that he knocked him out within 13 seconds. Now, Conor McGregor's his whole stick in the earlier years, back in like when he was a bit younger, his whole thing was to wind the person up first, to sort of get them triggered. Like, that's what made him so popular. He was giving all that banter, as we would call it, but he was antagonizing them. He was getting in their heads, and the whole. You would argue that his success. Yeah, he was a fantastic fighter. Yeah, he still needed a punch that was strong enough to knock someone out. He still needed the skills to do it. But he won a lot of fights before they'd even really hit the canvas. They say in boxing, and I think it was Mike Tyson that said this. I think it was Mike Tyson. He said that when you're doing the face to face, or it might have actually been McGregor that said it. When you're looking at a person in the face to face, the first person to look away is usually the one that loses. That's the psychology in it all, because they're usually the ones which aren't confident enough, you know. But yeah, but with the I'm not allowed to swear.
Depends in what context, like kind
Trash
of.
talk. Sorry, trash talk. Okay, I can say I was trying to find the right terminology. I could only think of the less appropriate one, but trash talking. With McGregor's trash talking, he won the Jose Aldo fight within 13 seconds because he got so much in his head that the guy was so angry inside, he just really wanted to hurt McGregor, and he flew in there, and McGregor just did his thing. Muscle memory. Other thing you could talk about is also quite psychological based. Muscle memory, and then bam. And yeah, lights out. Won his bag of money. But yeah.
It is so, yeah, it's so interesting that it's, so many different kind of like characteristics. And I guess a lot physiologically, I mean, so obviously when we talk about psychology, you're absolutely right. It is also things like muscle memory, it's things like procedural memory, it's also the physiology of movement as well, because we are talking kind of like right from the neuro level right the way up, and certainly within our sports psych course we talk about these kind of things. And I would have thought, for example, people like darts players, that is all about, and archers and archery and all those kind of things, there's got to be an awful lot of physiological kind of strain in that you've got to basically slow yourself right down to the point that you aim better. I once read, and I don't know if this is true or not, that women technically make better snipers or something because we're better at slowing down our heart rate or something, which means that we're better at aiming, but you don't tend to get more female shooting snipers or even females involved in necessarily archery or shooting as a sport, because it is seen as a bit more of a male dominated thing, I guess, possibly because it is aggressive or whatever. But technically we can slow our heart rates down more, our body is less physically active, and actually we make for a more accurate shot. But I don't know if I'm making that up or not. Maybe it's something that I want to believe and it's not actually true.
That's something that's probably worth researching after this call, because that'd be incredibly interesting, and we need to utilize that as a nation. If that is us, if our British women are our secret weapon, we really need to get them out there, and
Into
we could end
sniper
we could
training. I'm not
probably a
pro-war
lot
though,
of
so maybe
wars.
I'll retract this comment. Actually, no, we don't.
Yeah, I'm not particularly also, but I mean, you wouldn't need a war if you could end the war pretty quickly by taking out the number one, would you? So
I suppose that's true. Yeah.
but yeah, that was I mean, yeah, back to what you just said about the whole repetition thing and stuff, and I think that's the most interesting thing for me when I was studying psychology was, you know, there's several different ways to string a cat, to skin a cat, is what they say, is the saying. As gruesome as that sounds, I love cats, so.
Yeah. We do love cats. We've had several cats when we were growing up. Yeah. I was saying that there are several ways of doing things, basically. So
There are several ways of doing things, and that's what's really interesting about sports psychology, and that's one thing to bear in mind when you are studying it. That one thing might, I mean, also if you're thinking about improving yourself in your own sport in life, like there are different ways to get better at a sport from the psychological side, and I found it really interesting, like repetition. I'm personally am a huge one of repetition. I feel like it doesn't matter if I've been able to do something before or I've scored a goal like that before. I mean, I play at the moment just football, but it doesn't matter if I've scored a goal from so many yards away before. If I haven't done it in a long enough time and stuff, like I feel like I can't do it. Like I get a mental block. Like I think that's one of the reasons I got into psychology. I wanted to almost understand. I wanted to, in a way, basically fix myself in a way and get better at
I think
sport.
all of us do. But yeah.
I think, yeah. Ironically, I think a lot of psychologists do that. Yeah, and yeah, I think, and it's one thing I've got my girls to do is repetition, repetition, repetition. And okay, so what position do you find yourself as what is your playing position? For instance, there'll be a defender, and I'll get them to just focus purely, okay, you're on the left side, well, we'll work on you just clearing the ball to your left side. There's no point working with your body movements if you're going to clear the ball away on your right hand side, if you're going to tackle, if the attack was coming for your right hand side, because probably 80% of the time it will come from a certain way to your left hand side if you were like a left back or something like that. And but that is when you get into more of the high end levels of football. If you're talking about like lower level football, amateur football, you'd almost want to make sure you're polishing a rock and you're making sure that every sort of aspect of the game was like nicely polished. However, when they get to the more larger scales, like you sort of do a lot more sort of zonal sort of like preparation. I personally also find though, if you were having professional athletes, they should be able to do everything. And I would still suggest work on both sides. So please don't say, well, I think they should still work, because yeah, you should work on both sides. But if you're at a certain level and you want to make sure, okay, I got you here just to play left back, repetition, just doing left back, just doing this. That's why they say, I mean, during the World Cup, where there's lots of talk that Jed Spence is a left back. They're like, well, he can also play right back, can't he? Well, yeah, but he's a left back, And then you could also say, well, he doesn't have. It could also then, as soon as people start putting that down to his head that he can't play right back, effectively it's the exact same position, just on the other side. But at the same time, it isn't, because he's had that repetition. He knows when a certain person twitches in a certain way, that he knows they're going to go that way or that way. As soon as you flip it like a mirror,
Mm.
These sort of like, or these sort of cues are not really 100% maybe as sharp. They're not as trained. You've not had that repetition. You've not had the chance to build your catalogue of millisecond cues, which subconsciously you're not even aware you're doing. But if you were to get there and talk to him for an hour, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, hang on a second, yeah, I do that, that. I see one person does that, one person moves left, right, their toe twitches. Who knows? They raise an eyebrow. Who knows?
Mm.
Um,
That's
so
so interesting. Yeah.
it is so that's one of the things I got my girls to do. The defender side, I got them to do lots of like jockey into a certain direction. I had um, a an older girl that hadn't played football really before. She was young, but she was really talented. So she was old. She was young, new to the sport, but she was really talented. She was about 36. She'd kicked a ball with her brothers before, but she'd never played properly. And I remember really like working on her because for one, she was a great person. She was great to work with. And for two, I could see that she had this potential. She had this like a natural talent. So I was like, right, you're let's play to your strengths here. You're without being rude, you're not a runner. You're more of a person that can hold up the ball. So let's work to these strengths first. You're not a professional athlete. So let's just narrow it down to you do a basic job. So that means when I put you in, you're there to do just one thing, to just be like, the ball's going to land at your feet. You either hold it up or you're just there to hit it in from, 2 meters away or something like that. It's purely your job. So we just worked on that and worked on that and worked on that. So it came to our game against the top of the table. And previously in the season, this team, we played them and they'd beat us 7-1. Now,
Mm.
we initially were winning the game and we thought we were doing well. And they were a team which had dropped down from the league below. Now, one of the big issues with women's football in general is the disparity between talents between like one level and the next. So, for instance, you've got the Premier League and the Championship. To put it in perspective, if a team from the Premier League came down into the Championship in the women's sport, because there's not so many girls that play football. I mean, there's a lot more now. There's been a fantastic influx, but because there's still not that many in comparison to like men, um, that team which usually comes down demolishes everyone and then goes back up again. You really do just have like such a disparity. It's such a shame, and it is quite frustrating because you could have a great team in your league and you'd be doing really well, and as soon as you play one, you just end up losing. It's frustrating. However, going a little bit back to what we said before about that sort of like David and Goliath thing, our team, we did initially well, but then as soon as they then nicked a goal from us, our heads dropped. The psychology of that whole sort of like, well, they were going to win anyway. Oh, okay. And then they just sort of did one after the other. People started making stupid mistakes that they hadn't made before. And, they really did get sort of wrapped up in their own heads a little bit. And, the game was lost. But we played them again. You always play everyone twice. And we were up to about the 80th minute. And we were at 0-0. We'd held this team back. We'd worked on ourselves. We were doing great, and we had to sub a player off. And then came our this girl that I'd been working with. I shan't name names. I don't know if she'd want to be named, but she probably would because she should be proud. But she came on, and we were aiming for the draw. We were always aiming for the draw. We were like, okay, we're going to come on. You're going to play a role of just, if you get the ball, hold it up. If you get a chance, yeah, take it. And we got a corner, and the ball came in, and bang, it hits one player, just lands perfectly in her feet. Yeah. And from 2 meters away, everything that we've been training for the last couple of months, bam, we ended up winning 1-0 because this girl. Now, you could argue, is it just because, she's 2 meters away, she would have done it? But you could also say, well, had she not have trained, had she not done this repetition constantly, had she not had that belief, that this ball, she had the ability to score this goal, this moment of hesitation she could have took to think, oh, I should maybe pass it to someone else. Oh, I shouldn't be the one to score. I can't score. But she believed in herself because she'd had the repetition constantly. Bam, 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 bam. And we won the game. And, that's probably one of my highlights as a coach this game, because I felt like my influence, I'd also made an influence. I'd also helped this person a little bit to achieve that. And I'd give her, in a way, she's done it all, but it was sort of like a gift for me. And it was also like a gift to her, because she's always going to have that memory for the rest of her life, Everyone did. We all had a great party, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's really, really interesting. So I hadn't really thought about that from a coaching perspective, that again, it's all about that kind of like procedural memory, and it's kind of, you can basically train a certain move, and it makes perfect sense because we only have a limited capacity of information that we can kind of keep in our minds at any one time. And I think if you are able to kind of like condense that, you almost take away the working memory load, and you take away the kind of conscious load or perceptual load that you have, and you kind of try and almost rehearse it so it becomes subconscious and more procedural. It frees up processing for everything else. And I've never really thought about it that way. And again, it must be different for different sports, because you wouldn't necessarily have the same configuration or the same move. So it must be quite unique to individual sports, these kind of procedural memories for certain moves or certain plays. But it also makes a lot of sense why sometimes players, I think when I'm watching football as a non-football expert, you almost get frustrated because it seems like they're either not doing anything, or they're just kind of maybe running around, milling around, and they don't seem to be getting involved. Harry Kane, I love Harry Kane. I think he's got a lot to deal with, kind of like he's got a big family. He's obviously not as young as some of the other players, he's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders. So even from a psychological perspective, that is a lot to deal with anyway. And he's kind of like having to sort of shoulder almost the emotional weight of the team as the captain as well. And I think he does that really, really well. You can tell he really cares about them all, and you can tell why he was made captain. But one of the things that I think he gets criticised for sometimes is that, or I feel, again, as a non-football expert, is that he just seems to be kind of like floating around at the front, not really doing very much necessarily until a very specific certain situation occurs. And that's when he puts into play whatever it is that they've sort of like rehearsed and stuff. So when all the stars align, he's able to kind of do that last move that he's rehearsed. But that's probably intentional. It's probably not. But for me as a novice, I'm just like, why is he not tackling people?
Yeah. I mean, that is. Yeah, I mean, you've opened a bit of a can of worms when it comes to this one. So I have a huge opinion on this. And as a huge England fan, this was for me very frustrating, because on one side, you're 100% correct. He is 100% there to do that one specific thing, the one specific area. Now, a lot of the games that we had, they found for me personally at times that he wasn't able to get in those specific areas, and the defenders either did very well to keep him quiet, and at times, I mean, I can't remember exactly what game it was. He was there to score that last goal, that pivotal moment. He was there at the right time to get that goal, and we won. Yes, that is true. And that is right, that he, as you say, that he probably been working on that. He works on his headers, he works on that. And you almost, in a way, as a coach, you see, and I think this was almost Tuchel's downfall, and definitely Southgate's downfall, is that you rely so much on that. Oh, any moment he's gonna, do that one little bit of magic, and it's gonna be, oh, fantastic, we've won the game. Harry Kane scored a header, and it has happened. But that is the trap that we've sometimes fallen into, that we've gone, well, this moment might come, just give it a bit, it might come, we just need the ball to land here and Harry Kane to be there. And I feel like that game against Argentina, we were almost sat there. Well, yeah, obviously we changed and we got a little bit too defensive. The tactics on that half were wrong, but as soon as we saw that we were too defensive, we could have probably gone a bit more attacking. Now, did Tuchel not take Harry Kane off because he felt, well, this moment might come through Harry Kane? He might be the one which, takes the game by the cojones and, score that extra, that last minute goal, that fantastic, goal. But I feel, had we have maybe took him off, and put Ollie Watkins up front, that Ollie Watkins was surely also, he's a very talented player. He could have also done it. He'd have also had the fresh legs, and he could have also had a magical moment and scored the goal. So yeah, you're right. From a coaching side, yeah, it's great because you have a person that's totally trained to do a specific thing at a specific moment. But also, you can also find that coaches fall into that trap where they, like I say, they rely too heavily on those people, when sometimes, you should maybe give someone else a chance and they'd bring a new aspect. Then again, had he have swapped Harry Kane off and Ollie Watkins hadn't scored, would we sat there going, oh, why'd you take Harry Kane off? He's scored 60, 70 goals this last season. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't type thing. So, in hindsight, or Nachhinein, as they say in Germany.
So we've spoken a little bit about kind of, I suppose, what was going on in the World Cup. And I think one last thing I just wanted to mention about the World Cup before we kind of maybe move back a little bit more to sort of like what uni looked like for you, and kind of, where you sort of went after uni and what you did. Because obviously a lot of our sort of prospective students or our current students will be quite interested in kind of how you get into some of the things that you've kind of got into as well. One of the things that actually really frustrated me about the World Cup was the post Mexico interview. Have I got that correct? So was it the post Mexico game interview with Bellingham, and what the reporter said to him, and how it kind of, not with Bellingham, sorry. Well, no, with Bellingham, but with Tuchel and then with Bellingham. So I remember watching that. So just for context, for those that maybe aren't necessarily into the World Cup, they did the interview with Tuchel, and basically he kind of said they didn't do well enough, in layman's terms, right? It wasn't good enough. But they just won. They just played arguably one of their better games. Maybe they weren't necessarily expected to win that game. I think I remember thinking that they were probably a better team, but the odds were stacked against them because, again, home ground for Mexico. Mexico had only lost there ever, I think, like once. The altitude was crazy high. They'd only got there the day before. They weren't trained and they weren't prepared for it. Whereas physiologically, Mexico, it's their bread and butter. It's their day to day. They're used to it. Even the aspect of the fans as well. So kind of like, I know the fans had been giving other teams that had played there trouble, not letting them sleep, setting off fireworks, those kind of things. So the odds were sort of stacked against them. It was also incredibly hot and humid, I think. And they managed to win. They played some great football. Everyone thought it was a really, really good football match, really exciting. And then Tuchel kind of turns around and says, that wasn't good enough. Now, the thing that would have been okay, I think, had it been left there, because I think, again, that was probably just differences in communication style. I think that was probably just, he was saying what you said earlier. He wasn't necessarily saying that they were bad. He was just sort of saying they have more to do in terms of like mentality or whatever. But the reporter, I don't know who he was, but he kind of translated it almost as, yeah, he doesn't think that you did well enough or that you weren't good enough. And Bellingham sort of turned around and said, well, you could see that it kind of put a clear rift between them, because he got defensive of his team, understandably, and he got a little bit upset about the comment. And I remember turning around at the time to sort of like my partner who I was watching it with, and kind of saying, that's it. That reporter has just, from a psychological perspective, put a complete spanner, I think, in the works in terms of England's mental game. I think they did really well to recover, but I do remember thinking, because I can't, which match was next? They still won it, didn't they? Or did they?
Argentina. No,
Yeah.
Norway. It was
No.
Norway next. Norway.
So they
Yeah.
did still win it, but I don't think they played anywhere near as well. And I think a lot of that was down to the fact that their confidence and their self-efficacy would have been knocked with those comments. But again, not necessarily what Tuchel said, but the way that the reporter put it to them. So I suppose I haven't really got a question. It's more just like, have you got any thoughts on that? And I suppose as a coach, as a sports psychologist, as someone working with the team in that kind of role, how much of your role would you say, or potentially for those kind of like, yeah, working sort of like, you know, with England or whoever, is it to kind of almost protect players from that outside sort of media noise and social media and all those kind of things? How can players protect themselves as well? And do they have to? I suppose they must have to in this day and age, I would have thought.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a lot of
Sorry, that's a lot of
areas we could
questions in one
a
go,
lot of
really.
questions. Yeah. So I'll start off by saying initially, I think Tuchel's response is correct.
Mhm.
If he was talking honestly, yeah, we won that game. Yeah, it was probably arguably the best game of the World Cup to
As a fan.
as a fan, or even better as a neutral, I guess, because as a fan it was awful.
Oh, yeah, that's also true.
It was very nerve-wracking. I mean, but um, he was right in what he was saying. It was a terrible game of football from England's perspective. We played terribly at times. Yeah, we've won and we battled and we were down to 10 men and you would have to park the bus, but it wasn't great. It wasn't great football at all. It wasn't like we'd seen France play. You know, it wasn't a clear-cut, confident. You know, they really had felt the effects of playing in the Aztec Arena in Mexico. Yeah, it was incredibly hot. Yeah, it was incredibly challenging atmosphere, and they did fantastically. And you could say that the football was terrible, and I think that's what Tuchel was trying to say, that the football was terrible, but he still wasn't trying to take away from the fact that um, on a psychological side, they'd absolutely just smashed the ball out of the park and done an absolutely fantastic job. I mean, being down to 10 men under that pressure and still holding it, absolutely fantastic. And you could see, you know, how well they'd done. And, you felt as a fan how well we'd done. But still, the football was terrible. So what he was saying on one hand is basically you could have two truths. One hand it can be an absolutely terrible game of football, but then once you put into perspective what they'd achieved under the circumstances, you realised that they'd done really well. Even if they had performed under under par in a way. However, what the reporter did, and I think this has been also in times like kryptonite in general when it came to England, is the reporters and the media tend to try and spin these stories. And there was a lot of backlash, and there was a lot of people which were saying like this reporter should get fired. He shouldn't be able to report again on after post England games because he had tried to stir the pot. And I I don't know if that's terrible reporting. I can't really comment on that, but you're right. It doesn't do us any favor. If he is an England fan, what's he doing? Like, if he is like, what's he trying to gain from doing something like that? He's trying to get a reaction out of Bellingham. You can't say he wasn't. Now, did it work? Or after once the doors closed, did Bellingham sit there and go, and Tuchel sit and his team going like, oh yeah, like look, yeah, you did absolutely great. You fought, you did an absolute hero's job, but the football was terrible. And I think Bellingham and the other players, I think there was a post interview with Harry Kane who basically repeated exactly what basically Tuchel had said and agreed. Like, yeah, we played rubbish, and yeah, but it doesn't take away from the psychological success that they did have, though. And but I must admit, you would have to have a strong mentality to, and that's what he was saying. That's what Tucker was saying. This is purely mentality because they, yeah, I guess that's what he meant with mentality, isn't it? What he was saying. It was saying like, yeah, the performance was terrible, and that's what the report's trying to get out of him to say. Sit there and like really like criticize each individual player. Like, and then even afterwards, he asked them like on each individual player basis, like, how well did Bellingham do? How well did Gordon do? Like, and Rashford and Spence was the one he was trying to get out of him as well. But he then went on to say, no, this is pure mentality because it's pure. He was trying to say it's pure psychological. Like they really, they won the game through just confidence and being alert, being awake, repetition, doing their jobs. Which is one thing that Argentina was trying to stop us from doing in a way. They were trying to break down our ability by fouling us all the time, getting us out of the game, getting us angry, like you were trying to say, like trying to, overload our hippocampus, and so the point that we couldn't, function at our best at our elite level because we were distracted by how annoyed we were that someone had just, punched someone in the head, or they'd been treated unfairly, and yeah, their whole game plan from Argentina's side was to bully us and bully that mentality out of us that we're we're fighters type thing. And so some parts it did work. But yeah, back to what you're saying about the news reporter. I think he hopefully didn't get into Bellingham's head, and obviously Bellingham scored the winner against Norway, so I'm sure he's a professional. So I think he could probably cope with it. If you were to then go on to an amateur level, and you were to, which is probably what a lot of your students would end up working with, more amateur sort of style. Because look, to be honest, there's only so many jobs at the elite level. You'd have to work with amateurs, sports people. I think then you've got to be a lot more careful. They don't have that support structure. They don't have that years of training, and years of that mental bolstering that's a player like Bellingham or Kane has, like to carry the world. I'll be honest, I looked at these group of players and I would think I'd crumble. I'd crumble in the face of being on the world stage like they would. Like, no doubt about it. So you really need like a thick skin. On an amateur level, you really do need to be sort of a bit more careful, because a comment like that can play on a player's mind for years later. I still think about things that coaches have said to me when I was a kid, like, so especially if you're working with kids, like, please, and I think a lot of you, like, you've really got to be careful what you say in front of kids and how you approach them, because, you can really affect their potential if you go too hard on them. You've really got to understand that when someone's at that right age to sort of, give a little bit harder, You've also got to know your players as well. Like, if people have had particularly hard backgrounds, you've got to know what switches them on as a person and what could potentially damage them. You've really got to be careful. And that's what I was saying before with the whole, like, different ways to skin a cat. Like, if you're a coach on a coaching side, some kids or some players, they need that love, they need that affection, they need to feel like they're part of the team. Other people, they need a motivation. If you're a sports psychologist, please go and watch the Michael Jordan Netflix documentary. That thing is you'll see, if you look at it from the psychological side, and like then think about it and listen to what he's saying and stuff, like, he always needed that extra edge. He always needed, like, oh, like, now I'm pissed, as he would say, type thing, like, oh, now it's showtime. Like, he, like, create scenarios in his head where, you know, someone had said something bad about him or said, "Oh, you can't do this. You can't do this." You're like, "I'm going to show you now," type thing.
Mhm.
And he always looked for that edge. Whereas other players, you know, they might need to be a bit more sort of, you know, is it coddled is the word? It's coddled is the right word, isn't it? That's an English word.
Mollycoddled, yeah, looked
Coddled.
at sort
They
of like,
need that. You know, they need that protection. And I mean, that was what Southgate was really good at with the England team. There's a lot of
mm,
young players, and he was absolutely fantastic. And in my opinion, he brought football home because he gave us belief, you know, as a
mm,
nation. He really did. But he took a lot of young players, and he sort of, you know, he sort of knew which players he could wrap up with cotton wool or need to be wrapped up. He had that sensitive side. He he was a lot more of a psychological coach, and sort of, you know, he was making sure coaches players were protected here. He wouldn't have been that sort of Tuchel mentality, and I think that's what we they were the great side of Southgate was that he was really good at that, and he really sort of, you know, he brought that team together. He brought England together. But what fell for us sometimes is the fact that sometimes he needed that sort of like he needed someone that was a bit sharp, a bit more, you know, fork tongued like Tuchel is, with that whole like comment like, you know, we didn't do well, we did awful, you know. Um, but I think you've got to be very careful. You've got to be a very intelligent person and a very intelligent coach to know when to apply certain things, you know, when to, you know, which players need that, which players need that, you know. It's it's something that I think as a coach you'd be forever learning, and no one ever gets it right, you know. Um, and I've had lots of bad coaches, but I feel that's probably because they also hadn't had the education that hopefully your students will get, and you know, and they also from a different generation as well. So we're as a generation a lot more open to these sorts of ideas from a psychological basis, like how our words and our actions can impact these people. Maybe he was of a older generation, and maybe he wasn't really thinking too much of
thinking.
the impact. And I think that is, yeah, I think the media needs to be controlled a bit better, because I just don't think, I just don't get it. We want to do well as a footballing nation. We want to do well in our sports. Why are we putting extra hurdles in the way? Why are we trying to cause stress? Why are we doing this? But we never seem to do it when we individual sports. Like you never see anyone at the Olympics going like, "Oh well, you know, your trainer said that you ran 2 seconds slower. You know, is it because you know, I don't know, you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or you know, like, were you tired? Is it the altitude? You know, is it, you know,
I think you're right, yeah.
did you not practice enough? Like you wouldn't get that in the Olympics. I feel you wouldn't get that sort of
Mm,
reporting. But as soon as it comes to the football or other things, it's this constant sort of like badgering and belittling, and why aren't we behind everyone constantly? Why are I just don't get it. It's 100% like us as a nation. I know full well that when it comes to the Spanish media, that they're very harsh on their players at like a club level. And when it comes to like Real Madrid, that if a player isn't playing well, that they get slated in the media. Barcelona's the same, like they get absolutely slated. But I think I can't speak for like when it comes on a national level, but I think they're a lot more behind them. They're a lot more sort of like, oh, we can do this. I know in Germany they're a bit more sort of like, we can do this, we're going to win. I don't think I've been in Germany for almost 8 years now, and I've lived through also in Australia. When I was in Australia, that's where I met my wife, and the reason I went to Germany. Um, we watched, I think we must have watched like four competitions in football so far, and I don't think I've ever heard one German person that say other than we're going to win this. You
mm.
know, So yeah, maybe it's just
Very interesting. I think
yeah.
there are definitely loads of things to kind of like unpack there. Unfortunately, we probably don't have time to do it on sort of like this podcast, but I think as maybe a sort of takeaway message, it really depends what level you're working with. And we do have students that go on to work at all different levels, from amateur, to semi-professional. So, but I do appreciate what you were saying, that there's only so many jobs in coaching for like the English national team, kind of like, that's kind of like the top of the top. But um, I also hear what you're saying, and that actually maybe it's just as interesting no matter what level you're working at, because each
Oh,
level
100%. Yeah.
has its different needs as well. And I think
Yeah.
it shows that you've obviously thought about this a lot in your own role and what you do, that actually you have to adapt. We call it in psychology like individual differences, like you have to adapt based on the context and based on the individual needs of that person.
Yeah.
And again, it will be completely different if you're working in an educational or a developmental kind of like perspective, because there are kind of like greater stakes, maybe because of the fact that it's going to go on to affect their future confidence, self-esteem, all those kind of things. Yeah, so I think that is really, really interesting. So I'm just conscious of the time. So very, very quickly before I let you go, because I am going to interrupt more of your lovely sunny evening in Ibiza. Um, just to sort of like finish, can you basically just tell me a tiny little bit about kind of when you studied for your undergrad? So what was it like? So it was 3 years BSc psychology, sports
Yeah.
psychology.
It's a double award psychology. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's double award. So I did psychology and sports development as well.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So slightly different. So psychology with sports development is
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of how it was like phrased. Yeah. And you did it over 3 years. Did you do any modules that were specifically kind of like what are some of the things that you can remember covering? Can you remember?
Uh, Imagery was a huge one for me in the psychology. You're on about just like the psychology side of the course, aren't you?
No, more the sports side really, but both
Just
both.
everything in general. Yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of it was, yeah, imagery was a huge thing that we discussed. This whole idea, I don't know if you remember, Johnny Wilkinson might be a bit of an old one, but I remember this is the analogy we used when we were studying it and stuff. And this whole idea that, for those that don't know, Johnny Wilkinson is a
Rugby
professional
player.
rugby player, or was a professional rugby player, and very famously he was the kicker. So he was the one that kicked the goals, and or the tries, should I say, the field goals. I can't remember the terminology. And he would picture a clown with his mouth open, and he would aim for the ball to go through the clown's mouth, or at least that's what I got
Oh,
told. And we delved a lot into that and how that can help. We
that was one
also
of your
delved.
favourite.
That was one of my favorite, more because I was trying to add strings to my own bow of how I could, score a free kick better, or Um, another one we really delved into, which was really interesting, was the hypnosis side.
Hmm.
Now, it's it goes along the lines of that sort of like you either believe or if you don't believe type thing, you know. Um, some say it really works, some say it really doesn't. You sort of also need that. Sorry, the words slipped out of my brain. What is the word again we use? Superstitious side. Sorry,
Superstition, yeah.
this is two languages sort of going again. But
What is the German
um,
for superstition? Can you remember right now? It's probably gone as
oh
well.
no, no, the brains aren't. It's not linking up. The brain needs to be wired first. Do they call it pseudoscience?
Mm.
Pseudopsychology, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that is very much useful, but then it's also more going into like the therapy psychology. So it's like a sports therapy psychology sort of style of things. It's not more of like I was also always more interested in the sort of like the practical sort of like what I could potentially do on the field, what I could use on type of thing on the field to gain an advantage.
The applied
Or
aspects, yeah.
yeah, so like the applied psychology type thing. Whereas like I always found the hypnosis side is sort of like that's if you have a problem and you, for instance, every time you're one-on-one with a keeper, you miss or something. Like that's maybe something you could sort of delve in that sort of side, where it's like almost like a therapy type thing, which is very interesting. But it's like it's something you'd have to if you found it interesting as a student, you'd have to then specify in that in a way, I would think, which I would argue though is had it has its own uses, but you wouldn't necessarily be working one-on-one with a player on the field, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with more amateur. I wanted to work with more sort of like kids and make them better in a sport. And obviously you could use that sort of side with it a little bit, but you'd have to be very careful. But I think, you'd be then more of a person working in an office, cliche, someone lying there, on one of those sofas type thing. And yeah, you'd probably want to go into a more broader range of psychology than just specifically sports. You'd work with athletes, but you wouldn't necessarily need a sports psychology degree to, be working with athletes,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all in all, I found the course thoroughly interesting. And I think if you've got a passion for it, you'll do very well. You really will. And um, I think whatever level you end up doing it at, I think you'll feel fulfilled regardless, because you're doing your job, you're doing your passion, you're helping people. You see the impact. You know, sorry, my phone's just showing me I've got 40% battery, but it's showing me. Sorry. I think if you've got a passion and um, you'll be fulfilled no matter what. And I don't think it matters if you're doing amateur style or elite level. Obviously, there's going to be a difference in paycheck. That's obviously something everyone's always worried about, obviously. But I think if your main aim is how much money you can earn, I think you need to concentrate first on doing a great job and getting experience. One thing I would, as my advice, is to get experience, get as much experience as you can. Volunteer here, volunteer there. Really get yourselves involved. You don't necessarily always need to go into a job, or if you ended up coaching like a small amateur football team, for instance, you don't need to constantly be going psychoanalyzing every single player to make them the best one. Sometimes you just need to add a little bit of passion in there, and you do a world of good, and to learn, and also learn a lot about yourself as well, and to meet different characters, because yeah, you can learn a lot of paper and stuff, but like I think it's been a bit of the theme to this thing. It's like, different ways to skin a rabbit, but there's lots of different rabbits as well. You've got to make sure you learn people as well. You're going to need to sort of like, okay, well, yeah, this person, and also with genders as well, you've got to learn different genders. There was a massive age ranges as well. That's also huge. Like we had girls from the ages of 36 or 37 down to 16. I remember we had a 15-year-old girl that came up from our youth academy, and she started playing with the women, and she was an absolute little fighter. We also had some girls which came up, they weren't so, they're a bit more sort of timid and stuff, but you got to sort of like, as you grow as a person as well, you'll also be like, well, I'm a different person now to when I was 15. You've also got to take that into mind. They're also, if you've got an athlete which is 15, you've got to talk to them a bit differently until they're like 22. You got to go. You got to sort of figure out what works for them. What sort of like renaissance.
Resonates.
Yeah, thank you. With with them on that level, it's thoroughly interesting. It's thoroughly interesting, and I at times would love to study it again in a way because there's so much to learn, and I think now as a coach myself, now that learned I've met more people, I think I'd like to know different ways I could help them, you know. And so yeah, study, don't stop studying, get out there, make yourself available, because there's never a bad lesson you can learn, even if you don't do particularly well at a certain job or in a certain, or you don't like it here, you don't like it there, just getting that experience, you'll learn something from it and you'll take it on to the next job. And you never know, you might learn something from that previous job which could really help someone else. And I think that's really important with psychology, is that you might not always have all the answers, but you might be able to help someone by gaining answers from, you might be able to help someone in the future, if you learn that sort of way. I don't know, sorry, I think I've rambled a little bit too much.
No, that's perfect. I mean, we'll leave it there, but I think that is a really good bit of advice to end it on. So not only are there many different ways to skin a rabbit, but there's many different rabbits. And I'm totally going to try and look up this expression, because now in my mind I'm thinking, is it fish? Is it cats? Is it rabbits? Or is it fish? There are many different animals and they can be skinned.
Yeah, but you do scale a fish though, don't you?
That's true. So maybe it's
You
not
don't
fish,
you don't
but
skin a fish. I don't think fish have skin.
let's talk about
Wait.
fish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we get back into like animal anatomy, that, and then I think the last thing that you said about it being a portfolio of experience. So because it's so different from sport to sport, level to level, age to age, gender, and individual to individual, it's more about building up this portfolio of experience that you can then take from one job to another. Because if you're working as a coach or working as a sports psychologist, it's going to be very different depending on the context that you're in. And it could be that you take something that you've learned years ago and you put it into practice later on. And yeah, it helps you in a different way, but each is so kind of like nuanced. So yeah, no, that's really good. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining me today, Rob, and sorry for interrupting your
No,
holiday. I shall release
it's
you back
fine.
to my lovely sister-in-law, who's probably like, we should be going out for dinner or something.
Yeah. Well, I think, to be honest, I'm actually thoroughly hungry, so you know.
Yes, just for context, my brother, as a coach and very active person, probably eats about 6 meals a day. So yeah, that's
I
another
do.
top
I
tip.
do
Calories.
eat a lot. Yeah, that's another thing we get into, the psychology of yeah, trying to train when you're hungry, or I don't know. That's something I never looked into really. But obviously it affects you, doesn't it, on a chemical sort of level. If you've not eaten, then you can't perform, can you? You can't remember as well. Lack of sleep, huge as
Oh my
well.
goodness. Yeah, there are many more
Yeah,
things we could cover.
there's so
Okay,
many things. Sorry.
that's all right. We'll have you back on again to talk about it even more. Next time we have like a big sporting event, maybe Euros, 2 years time, right? We'll
Yeah,
do it
I'll be here
before
for
then, but
your. I'll be here
women's,
for.
no, the
Well, that
women's
the Women's World
next.
Cup. Yeah, you could talk to me about the Women's World Cup. I'll end up watching it. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
think I'll be staying up till 3 a.m. because this year was very hard with work and staying up till 3 a.m. So I think I've learned now. I'm in a bit of at my age. I think I might just, hopefully the games are played at a bit more of a reasonable time of day. But yeah, it'll be really interesting as well for me, talking about the Euros, how Jurgen Klopp has an impact on the German team. So I'll be able to tell you all from a first-hand experience if the Germans are happy with Jurgen Klopp. They seem very happy at the moment. I think they're going to win the next Euros already because they got Jurgen Klopp. Yeah.
Is this a place? Jürgen, I don't understand this reference. Like, it's not a place, is
All
it? You've
right,
just
guys.
looked at me, gone out. Like, is it a person, a player?
No,
No.
Jürgen Klopp is the ex-Liverpool manager. He's a
Oh.
German Liverpool. He's from Germany. He was the ex-Liverpool manager. He won the Premier League with Liverpool after I think it's the first time they'd won it. I think they'd won the English League before, but they'd never won the Premier League, and they'd always fallen short. And he's a fantastic trainer. He's really good. He's one person I personally really hope was going to be our trainer, but unfortunately no. But he was the German commentator during the Euros, and he wasn't very happy with Nagelsmann, which was the trainer at the time. And then Nagelsmann did not a great job. I mean, he was unlucky because they had lots of injuries to good players, like Schlotterbeck got injured, and there's this young player coming out from Bayern. I can't remember his name now. It's on the tip of my tongue. But he was unlucky. Anyway, the Deutsche Verband, which is like the German FA, they basically fired Nagelsmann because they weren't happy to losing to Paraguay or Panama. The Paraguay, Panama. Sorry, I'm confused. I can't remember either. Anyway, Jurgen Klopp took it over, and Jurgen Klopp in Germany is a hero. He used to train BVB, which is Dortmund. Did fantastically well there. He's got that connection in Germany. So now Germans are very much sort of like, we've got the guy, we've got the man. He's our Kevin Keegan, you know, or so God rest his soul. And I think they really feel like now it's time. We're going to finally get out of the group stages, but we'll see. We'll see. They've still not got the players. They've got no world-class players, so I'm not scared. Famous last words. This is now going to get clipped. You're going to have a German student that's going to be like, see, dein Bruder hat das gesagt.
I know, like 2 years later, and like kind of.
Yeah, halt die Klappe.
I imagine it's always a sense of contention in your home, yeah, with your German
No,
wife.
no.
And but we really better had leave it there.
Yes,
Thank
we
you
had it.
so much for doing this for us, and we will definitely get you back on to talk about it. And thank you, and enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Thank you very much.